There is a perception in the secular world that people become religious because they hit bottom and they have nothing else but religion to hold on to. And if they had something else, they wouldn't need religion. People who are religious believe the opposite. They believe that the people who are secular, that their lives are empty, and when they realize just how empty their lives are, or if they have some problems, they will eventually become religious because they have nothing else to hold on to because secularism has failed. Ben Gurion, when he started the state of Israel, when he helped start the state of Israel, God made the state of Israel, Ben Gurion believed that the orthodox were a dying breed, that whatever compromises he made with the orthodox was not going to last very long because in the face of secularism, superior financial and social rewards, as well as being more informed of the truth, religion being backwards, archaic, almost like cave dwellers, they would eventually give up and become part of the modern state of Israel. Of course, that's not what happened. Most religious people don't have anything to do with secularism or with secular books or secular studies. Hence, they don't have to face any kind of questions to their faith, only whether their faith can overcome the temptations of a better physical world. As we get older, the temptations of the flesh are not as enchanting. And Orthodox Jews, even Orthodox Jews who had a taste of secularism, don't find the secular world, don't find it that attractive, even if they're successful. They find that they need more meaning in life, they need more insight into what life is all about, and the secular world really doesn't give them any of that insight. You know, science doesn't tell you why things are the way they are, what the purpose is. And so you find that larger and larger numbers of educated, semi-religious, religious Jews become more and more involved in Torah study, more involved in the commandments, because there really isn't anything that can compete with what appears to be the authenticity of the Torah. But let me just review the attitude of secular Jews for a moment. There was a feeling that people had that what people needed was ethics. They had to have a purpose for living. The purpose for living was to be as successful as you possibly can in the physical world, using the tools that you had, whatever education you could get, and the force of your personality to make you a success. That's a formula that worked, but it also worked eventually for Orthodox Jews. Orthodox Jews who entered professions, then entered businesses in the United States were successful, just as successful on average as their non-religious or the secular counterparts. Question was, why remain Orthodox? To the Orthodox, to the secular, why remain Jewish? To the secular. The question was, who would break down first? It was the secular Jews who broke down first because as Jews, there was no reason for them to continue. if you don't believe that in the God of history, which most rabbis and therefore most of the children no longer believed, if there is no God of history that directs the Jewish people toward where they're supposed to go, so there's no purpose to being Jewish other than culture. Some people may have a sentimental attachment to this. I'm not attached sentimentally. I love the Jewish ways because I believe them to be authentic. If they're not authentic, I'm not interested in sentimentality. It doesn't do anything for me to have a Jewish meal once in a while and remind me of Bubby. Doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't do anything for 90% of the Jewish secularists who are leaving our fold. The Jewish orthodoxy, confronting modernism, confronting all the forces that the secular world felt was overwhelming, in the process learned how to survive with these things. Historians, sociologists, archaeologists, many of the schools focused their wrath and their anger against the Bible and the people who are the children of the Bible, the Jewish people. But an amazing thing happened in the 20th century. Some of the new discoveries, or many of the new discoveries, actually strengthened the veracity of the Bible. And the theories of the Wellhausen school, the school of Bible criticism, the school that believed that Jewish religion was a product of a later in Jewish historical life. Moses was invented in the 6th century of the Common Era. Torah was put together then. Before that, it had been a hodgepodge of certain beliefs, but now was put together in organized fashion during the days of Josiah. That was their belief. There was really nothing to back up that belief except that there was a story in the book of Kings that they discovered a scroll. Oh, that discovery of the scroll must have been that they put it together. Well, over the years, those who have analyzed those arguments see how specious those arguments really are. The people like Rabbi Victor Miller and other scholars really fired tremendous salvos against those arguments and scored some very, very important hits. There were discoveries in archaeology that indicated that the narrative of the Bible was correct, that Jews actually learned how to write and read and write a long time before the Torah was given and written down. There is evidence also of all of the various historical events. You know, they claim that Jericho couldn't have happened at the time that it was said to happen, but the amazing thing about it is that the Jericho site indicates everything that the book of Joshua said it is. It says, "V'Yericho segerasim sugeras." Yericho is locked up and further locked up. Defied understanding until you realize that there were two levels of the walls of Jericho, the outer walls and the inner walls. And it was a small site, but there were two levels of the place being locked up. The stores at Jericho were burned completely. Now, you don't burn stores of food when you're engaged in a military conquest because you need the food to continue. There's just so much you can forage from the outside. When you have vast stores of grain, you don't burn them. And it appears that, the stores of grain were burned after the complete uh, breakdown of the walls of Jericho, as if they had been broken down by an earthquake. Jericho was burned, but only a couple of houses remained. Those houses that remained remind us of the house of Rahab and her family, and that this was supposed to be the house that they weren't going to destroy. Sure enough, it was a house on the outer edge of the wall, which fits in exactly as the Torah tells us. All of the evidence, all of the findings of the place of Jericho indicate complete agreement with the book of Joshua. So the fact that the time doesn't fit in, only thing you need to do is to change the time that you expect it to be. And that's what some scholars have done, and they've been able to really make it actually work, that the time of the entry into Jericho corresponded to the time that you could discover through carbon dating and other datings of materials, various artifacts that existed there. The point being that all of the discoveries that were said to be anti-Torah, anti-Bible, were discovered not to be exactly as those archaeologists said. For every statement that Professor Finkelstein says against the history of the Jewish people under the Bible, Professor Dr. Elat Mazar discovered in actual findings of stone and mortar, she actually found the places that he claimed did not exist, or were just small little sites, and she discovered that they were much more than just small little sites. So the arguments for secularism have been, for the most part, smashed in the last century. Furthermore, the historical evidence that was mounted by the historians that the Jewish chronology was wrong has been decimated by the efforts of Rabbi Alexander Hull. Alexander Hull shows how the historians got it wrong. The Jewish chronology had it exactly right. Now, once this is established, that the questions of Wellhausen, the questions of the historians, are no longer really questioned, that the Jewish chronology is absolutely 100% correct, as best as we can discover. What does that tell you? That should tell you that the Jewish tradition is correct. And if they are correct, then the Jewish way or the Jewish law is the correct way. But that is elusive. The secularists refuse to acknowledge that this even exists. For example, when Professor Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz came here, about 30 years ago, he told us that there had been a discovery from computer scientists in Israel that concluded that the book of Genesis, the book that the Wellhausen students of biblical criticism assumed was the hodgepodge editorial engineering of a staff who took from 3 or 5 or 7 different authors and put them into a single book somewhere around the 6th century before the Common Era. That idea has been totally smashed, because the book of Genesis, which is the linchpin of their theories, was really written by one author. I looked at the study. Study can't conclusively prove to you that there's one author. study merely looks at patterns of language. And the conclusions of the pattern of language by several scholars from different places, both secular and religious, and even a mathematician or computer expert from Germany, all came to the conclusion that it is an 80% chance that the book of Genesis was written by one author. Compare this with the following. Reading Shakespeare's plays and looking at the language and analyzing the language, there's only a 25% chance that Shakespeare wrote all of his books, all of his plays. Now, there was a theory that Sir Francis Bacon wrote most of them or wrote all of them, but the common accepted idea by scholars is that it was William Shakespeare, that he single-handedly wrote all of his plays. And yet, because of the fluctuations in speech and speech patterns, there's only a 25% chance that he wrote all of them. Yet we're convinced that he did. If that's the case, why is the secular world not yet convinced that the computer has indicated that more than likely 80%, the one who authored Genesis from the beginning is the one who authored it at the end? And the answer has nothing to do with secularism. It has nothing to do with scholarship. It has to do with ego and with the desire of a person to prove somebody else wrong. The secularists are not interested in answers, in true answers. They're not interested in truth, in fact. They're interested only in hearing their questions and using the questions to justify their own desires. Why are you pro-abortion? I don't believe in the Bible. Why are you for no sexual moral code? I don't believe in the Bible. I don't believe in the Bible standards. Why are you for every deviant kind of sexual practice? Again, I don't believe in the Bible. I don't believe there's a supreme being to tell me what to do. I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And that's the whole crux of the argument. It has nothing to do with truth. It has nothing to do with morality. It has everything to do with desire for personal pleasure or for vindictiveness. Ben Gurion thought that the orthodox world would disappear. Orthodox world didn't disappear because in the pursuit of truth, an indicator as to where the truth is more on the side of the orthodox than on the secular. And that's why the orthodox are flourishing, and they continue to increase in number. And soon, not saying next year, but in a very short period, the majority of Jews in Israel will be Orthodox to various degrees. Some will only have a kippah sruga. Some will not have a kippah, but they will go to synagogue on Shabbat and keep kosher. And some will have beards like myself, and some will have long payas. And some will look like you, but they'll be all Orthodox.